the controller is the entry point of our API REST, which means that our customer or our HTTP client will send a request to our controller, and then the controller will send to our service. And to do that, let's create our class. So let's create here a new Java class. Let's create first our package so we can organize our project. So let's create package here and let's call it controller. And inside the controller, now we're going to create our Java class. So let's create here new Java class, and we're gonna call it product controller. So okay, so to make sure our controller is indeed our entry point of our API REST, we need a few annotations here. The first one, it must be the REST controller. What is the REST controller? Just to make sure here, some different approach here. Spring Boot runs on top of the Spring Framework. So Spring Framework, it's not just for API REST. You also create web applications in the traditional way, like the SSR application with server-side rendering. And with that, we have controller and we have REST controller. The controller means that we're going to return, for example, a response, like a view, for example, in a HTML page or something like that. But when you're using REST controller, basically we are saying that we have a response or a response body attached to our response. So we use REST controller. So this, you make sure that our class here it will be returning JSON. Okay, it will be returning JSON, and we need another one here, which is the request mapping. What is the request mapping does? Request mapping, we are saying that the request mapping that this class, this REST controller, it's under a specific URL, which could be, for example, products. So products. All right. So when somebody sends us a request for our API, when after the context, for example, the 8080 we're going to redirect to the request that the URL that starts with products. And here, when we do that, we have to create a few methods that it's connected to the type of HTTP request that our application is receiving. For example, in get, HTTP get, HTTP post, put, delete, and etc. But first, our service is the class that we need to inject here. So we could use that methods like save and final that we just created. So let's add here private final, and let's create our product service here, product service. All right. And of course that we're using final, so we need to add to our constructor, but we are using longbox, so we just need to use the annotation for required args constructor here. And now we need to create our methods, and the first method we're going to create is a post mapping. So we're gonna attach our method to the request type of post, HTTP post. So post, it's a HTTP method that it's used to create a new resource inside our API REST. So we're going to receive an information and we're gonna persist inside our database, for example. So we're gonna receive a payload. For example, we're gonna receive a JSON in our request body. So we're gonna create a public. And there is a few information that is very interesting to add here, because we need to control the entire response that we're going to provide to our customer, to our client. So to do that, we need to use something called response entity. Response entity allows us to, for example, return an information to our client. And this information we could add, for example, the HTTP code. For example, we need to add a 200 for success, 201 for created, 204 to say that it's a no content response. So we need to, for example, use here. Let me create the method, and then we explore the possibilities. Okay, so we have here the response entity. So let's choose response entity, and we need here to say something, what kind of data we're going to return. So in this case, we're going to return a product. We're going to return a product, and we're going to call it save. It will be the save method here, and we need to receive the request body to be saved into our database. So we need to receive our product from our request. And how can we do that? First, we're going to create here a product object, product and product. Okay, so but how can I extract the request JSON from my request and add into my variable called product, which is the type of product, which is the entity type that we created? To do that, we use an annotation here called request body, like this one here, request body. So it means that the JSON that we got from the request, it's going to be parsed inside our variable here automatically, and then we're going to call the product service and access the save passing our variable. And we need to return something. Usually when we are creating, or when we're using a post mapping that is going to create a new row inside our database, we return a response entity 201, which is the created method. So we can just return here, and then we're gonna use response entity. Oops, sorry, I selected the wrong response. We're gonna return an response entity dot point status. Here we can choose, let me finish here, and then we just sorry, product. I'm gonna just add here the entire, just a second, let me remove this with the line here, cut, and here let's just paste in here. So what's going on here? We're going to receive a payload, which is our JSON from our request. We're gonna parse inside our product here, and we're gonna send it to our service that we will use the repository to save definitely in our database. So, but in the HTML response here, we need to say that we're going to return an created, which is, let me click here. As you can see, that's the HTTP code for our created here. Okay, so when somebody send us a post to create a new product, we're going to return this code, this HTTP code, as a response. All right, so and the last method that we need here for now is to return all the information that we saved inside our database. So we're going to use the get mapping here. So get mapping, and here we're gonna return response entity, and we're going to return a okay, which is, let's just, let me zoom in here just to make sure to make it more visible here. So we're going to return a response entity of a list of products, which comes from util, and we called the method we called find all, and then we're going to return a HTTP HTTP 200 to make sure that it's a successful request. We also could do things a little bit different, because in this response entity we also have the OK, which is directly, and we don't need to use this body here, so just need to use like this, and this way our project is supposed to work perfectly. Let's run the project here and see if is everything all right here. Okay, the project, oops, sorry, let me, okay, the project is running perfectly, but for us to send a request to our API REST, we need a HTTP client, for example, Postman, Insomnia, or something like that. But we have something very interesting, because we can use the SpringDoc, which is the API documentation that we can add to our project, and it will make more easier for us just to work with JSON without creating manually the JSON and send a request. So to activate the SpringDoc inside our application, we just come here to our .xml. Let's open here, open XML. I'm going to add the SpringDoc dependency here. So let's locate here, dependency. Above the dependencies here, it's the end here. So let's add this one here. Let's save. I'm going to click here to update our .xml, and by doing that, it's already available a few options. There's a new URL that we can access and be able to use our documentation. So now let's just play here. Let's run the project. Okay, project is running. I'm gonna get here and browser tab here for us to access. So let's call localhost. Oops. Oh, sorry, my keyboard has changed here apparently, because I use a shortcut. Let me change back here, just a second. Okay. So now we can access local, and then we have this Swagger UI here, and that's the final URL to open the SpringDoc API, which basically is this Swagger documentation here. So this is the full SpringDoc that we allowed, that is running in our project by default. We can change these informations here using a OpenAPI bean configuration. We can change a few things here. So now we can create these requests directly from our documentation to test it out our project. So the first thing here, we're going to create a post. Let's just click here and try it out. First, let's check it out, all the products in the project. Let's click here, and you can see that the 200 here is returned, which is an empty list. There is no data inside here our database. So let's create the first one, try it out. And as you can see, the documentation already brought us here the entire JSON we need. So let's remove what we don't need to pass to send. Let's create a name for our product. Let's call SSD, for example, 200 500 gigabytes, for example. It's just a product. Let's say that it's something like, I don't know, maybe $100, for example. And let's just send. Click here in execute. Okay, we executed, and let's see Okay, we got the result. That's the result that we want. And that's the JSON that we want. And it also have got the ID number 1, okay? So let's save another one. So let's just click here and let's change the name and the price of a new product here. Let's zoom in. Let's, I don't know, maybe create a new one called, for example, laptop. Let's create a laptop. And let's add a price, I don't know, maybe $500. It's okay. It's just for testing, okay? So I executed, and now we have another record, another row in our database. And let's just execute the get mapping, the get, the method that retrieve all data, which is a HTTP get. And let's click here again. And as you can see, you have the curl here, this URL that you can, for example, import the entire request for your REST client, your HTTP client. We have the entire URL here, and we here all have the data inside our database. So we have 2 records in our database, and it's every record is here. And let's check it out. How is the database? So here we have our database, and let me close here. Let's open again. It's closed. Let's click in our database. It's called sales. Let's refresh it, and now we're going to double click here, and as you can see, the database is with the same data that we send over the Swagger to our application. So now let's check it out, our application console. Because we said in our application properties here that we're going to show the SQL from our every query that is submitted, send it to our database. We're going to format and going to show it. So now, as you can see, the entire SQL query is here. First, we selected something, which was the first, we ran the list all from the Swagger, and now we have the insert into, we have another insert into, and then we listed everything. So if I click here and clean all, and then try to retrieve again, there's another retrieve, and there is another SQL code, SQL query here in our console. So basically, we created our project, we created our entity, which is mapped to our database table called products. We created attributes. We said that our ID was our primary key, which is the identification, the unique identification for our table rows. And we created a repository, which is we extended from JPA repository that allows us to use a few methods like fetch data, save data. We have a lot of methods that are allowed in here. And we created our service class, which you'll be able to save, to find all records, for example, to fetch all data, to save a new data. And we created the controller to do that. So we retrieve when somebody sends a request to products, and it is a post mapping and send us a request body. We're going to persist this data inside our database. And here, using get mapping, we said that when somebody sends a get to our URL, we're going to retrieve all information from the database and add to the response of the request.